Hi guys, today is the last day that you are going to be studying up on World War One. Today, as yesterday, the war ended, and then today we're looking at the peace plans that they put into place after the war. We're going to look at two peace plans. We're going to look at Wilson's peace plan, and Woodrow Wilson, he was the president of the United States at the time. And then we're going to look at the Versailles Treaty, and the Versailles Treaty is actually going to be the official peace plan. It was the final one. And Versailles, it's called the Versailles Treaty because of the Palace of Versailles, where if you go to Paris, you can actually visit the Palace of Versailles. It is where the King Louis XIV lived. It's very lavish and beautiful. Okay, so on your sheet of paper, on your notes, you have on assignment 14A, you have number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 listed at the top. You have 5 questions you need to answer. The first question is, which new nations bordered Russia after World War I? So let's look at this map and try to figure that out. Which new nations? So here is Russia, Soviet Union, Russia, same thing. And then the new nations are going to be with the red lines, new borders. New countries are going to be, the name of the country is going to be in this big capital red letters. So which new nations border Russia? You have 1, Finland, 2, Estonia, 3, Latvia, 4, Lithuania, 5, Poland. Those are all going to be bordering Russia. So write those down. Oh, look at Finland, Estonia, Latvia, and just Poland, not Lithuania. Because if you can see right here, you don't have any border right there, Latvia and Poland, cut it off. Okay, so make sure you have down those 4 answers. Okay, question number 2. How did Russia change after World War I? So again, Russia is the Soviet Union here with the green. So before World War I, see right, this color says former Russian Empire. All of this was Russia. That was the border of it. All of that. But now you have these new countries, these new borders. So Russia lost a lot of land. 5 new countries were formed out of former Russian territory. So this is, as you write that, just note that this is what modern day Europe looks like, almost, and why it looks like that. These countries right here, Czechoslovakia, Yugoslavia, those countries are a little different now since the 1990s, but all these are still the same from that time period. Okay, on to number 3. Number 3 says, what happened to Austria-Hungary after World War I? So, this map, we have Austria-Hungary pre-World War I, before. And you have all these arrows pointing out. If you can look what happens. See this Austria-Hungary? Post-World War I, there's no Austria-Hungary. But there's an Austria and there's a Hungary, but it's much smaller. See, the Poles got their own country in Poland. The Romanians got a bigger country in Romania. So all in all, the empire of Austria-Hungary was broken up into the countries of Austria, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, and Yugoslavia. Here's Yugoslavia, Czechoslovakia. Those are different countries now. Those don't exist anymore, but after World War I, that's what happened. Okay, on to number 4. If you need to pause it and write, go ahead and do that. Okay, number 4 is going to be here in a second. So here's what we have, and you're going to see a funny guy come on the screen. This is a plant. It has its 4 roots. Okay. This guy is weird. So you have a lawnmower. It comes in and it mows over the top of a plant. but the roots are still there. So the weed that was here, the weed, not the kind of weed that you usually talk about, the weed that's in the ground, the annoying plant, is gone. Okay? But it grew back. Okay? Weeds always grow back. Why? Because they have the root. So we're going to relate this to the war. So we say, hey, we thought you took care of that stubborn dandelion. We thought we got rid of the weed. The weed is going to represent World War I here. I thought we got rid of World War I. We're done. But this weed is going to keep growing back as long as the roots are still there. And if you think back to World War I at the beginning, what were the 4 main or root causes of World War I? And this is number 4 on your paper. What were the 4 main root causes of World War I? Militarism, alliances, imperialism, and nationalism. So you need to write that on your paper for number 4. But these are the root causes, and you're going to see how World War I is going to affect the root causes of World War I is going to be the root causes of World War II as well in a second. Now, you may say, Ms. Plum, I thought assassination was the root cause of World War I. No, it wasn't a root cause. It was the catalyst. It was the thing that set everything off. But militarism, alliances, imperialism, and nationalism were already in place before that assassination occurred. So, before we go on to the next slide, make sure you have number 4 down. These 4 things down here. That's World War I. So then, the Treaty of Versailles, World War I ends, the Treaty of Versailles comes through. You have World War II growing back. The Treaty of Versailles contributes to World War II because, and this is the answer for number 5, the Treaty of Versailles only took off the weed. It didn't take the roots away. The roots are still there. It didn't take the weed. Alright. Wilson's plan for peace. This is on your notes now. We're looking at the box that says 14 points, Wilson's plan for peace. So remember, Wilson was America's president at the time. President Wilson's goals for peace after World War I, known as 14 points, included the following. And on your paper you have A, B, C, and D. The first one, A, Wilson's points. A, he wanted to end secret agreements among nations. He didn't want these alliances and secrets going on. He thought that was one of the causes of World War I, and he was trying to prevent it. B, President Wilson wanted freedom of the seas. He wanted free trade. He wanted a limit on arms. Arms here is weapons. And if you think about the German U-boats being one of the causes of World War I, us joining World War I, German U-boats were preventing freedom of the seas. They were preventing free trade, and they were using too many arms. There was with militarism, with the buildup of military, you had so many weapons coming into place and people were ready to fight. So if you keep arms limited, then people won't be as excited to fight or have reasons or ability to fight. Alright, C is President Wilson wanted to allow national groups self-determination. In other words, he wanted groups like the Poles and the Slavs and the Romanians and the Ukrainians and all those people that had their own national group but not their own country. He wanted them to have self-determination, meaning he wanted those countries to be able, those groups of people to be able to have their own country. And the last thing he wants is a formation of a League of Nations in order to protect the independence of all nations and settle international disputes. So, in other words, the League of Nations would be kind of like a world court. Now, after World War II, they developed the United Nations, but this is World War I. United Nations now serves as a kind of world court, and so the League of Nations would be a world court where they help protect independence of nations, meaning they back countries up. If they need help, they help give them money, maybe loans. They help with leadership if they need it, but they don't force it. And then they settle international disputes. So say two countries are having issues with each other, League of Nations would try to be a middleman in that situation and settle the dispute and issue in a civilized way rather than going to war. Okay, moving on to the next slide. Oh, hold on. Before I go, one thing about President Wilson and his... So, all these talks about the peace plan at the end of World War I took place in the Palace of Versailles, which you saw at the beginning of the slideshow. And all the leaders of the countries that had been in the war came, and they brought their ideas and how should we fix these issues. So you have the leaders of America, Japan. You even have Japan there. You have the UK there, Britain. You have France. You have Russia. You have Bulgaria. You have all these countries that fought in the war, but you know who wasn't invited? Germany. Fun fact. Because remember, Germany started the war. They did not want to invite Germany, and we're going to see what actually happens to Germany after this peace plan is put into place. But remember how America was only in the war for a year? All these other countries have been fighting for 4 years. So when Wilson came in and said, "Oh, I think this should be the plan," they didn't go for that because they said, "You've only been in the war a few months, not even a year. Why would we listen to you when you didn't even fight in it that long?" So just think about that, and think about now how America, and you have Obama traveling around trying to make peace with the Middle East, trying to give them ideas on how to solve their issues. The same thing was happening back then with America trying to be the problem solvers of the world. Okay, moving on. So the second treaty, well, the 14 points wasn't a treaty. The Versailles Treaty is going to be the final say-so here. It is the actual peace plan. And you need to write in your box next to the number 1, next to Versailles Treaty, Germany was forced to. And then you're going to have a list of A, B, C, and D. Germany is screwed after this. They were not invited. And remember, they had caused the war. They had used the most power in the war. They had perpetuated it the most. So Germany has to, by force, take full blame for the war. They have to sign a sheet of paper, the Versailles Treaty, that says we take blame for the war. They had to completely disarm. You need to be writing this down on your paper. They had to completely disarm, meaning they had to get rid of all their weapon arsenals. They couldn't build up a military. They couldn't build up weapons. They had to pay huge reparations to the Allies. Reparations are like if someone does bad, if someone causes something bad to happen to you where you miss out on money or something like that, they have to pay you. So basically all of the damage done by World War I, because Europe was ravaged after World War I, France especially. So Germany had to pay France to help rebuild the buildings, rebuild the economy, etc. And actually, fun fact, they did not finish paying the reparations until, I do believe, last year or the year before. So almost 100 years, and they were still paying off their debts to the Allies. The last thing that Germany was required to do was to give up its colonies to the Allies. So to put this in perspective, say that America was responsible for the war and America was being forced to do this. America would then have to give up its holdings, like Puerto Rico, at the time, the Philippines, Hawaii. It would have to give up their land to the other side of the war. Germany had to give up its colonies. It had a lot of colonies. It had islands. It had places in Africa. It had to give up its colonies to the Allies, to France and Britain and the U.S. and Russia. Okay, and then you have a star in the next box down. You need to make sure you write this, because you need to write this word for word right here, because this is a big one. Germany was an angry, humiliated nation, setting the stage for World War II. World War I leads to World War II, the war that you all know about, the Pearl Harbor, the Hitler. World War I gets Hitler going. Hitler was so upset at the end of World War I that Germany has surrendered. He vowed to make the world pay, and he did not want to give up, and so he would set off the events that led to World War II, because Germany was so in a bad situation. They were angry. Versailles Treaty was very harsh on them. Okay, moving on. More about the Versailles Treaty. Oh, this is the land that Germany lost. So this was all the German Empire before, but since after the war they had to give some to Denmark, they had to give some to Lithuania, Poland, Czechoslovakia, France, Belgium. You can pause it if you want to look at it a little more, but their country gets a lot smaller. And this blue area right here is Germany now. So they lost like half of their land. Okay, this goes under the number 2. Based on the goal of self-determination, many new nations were formed. And then you have your examples. You have a box for number 2. You have a box for the examples. Finland, Poland, Yugoslavia, Czechoslovakia. We looked at this already at the very beginning in our questions. But self-determination, we said earlier, this is an idea from Wilson's 14 points, is that these countries, these nationalities of people, Hungary, Austrians, the Czechs, the Polish, that they get their own nations, and so that's what's going to happen here. Okay, make sure you have that. If you need to pause it, pause it. I'm moving on. Okay, this is the last thing that we're going to look at for the Versailles Treaty as far as what was actually in the treaty. The Allies agreed to form the League of Nations. So they did take Wilson's idea for the League of Nations, that world court. Fun fact, if you look at this, America is pink. Pink. Non-member. America actually ended up not joining the League of Nations, even though it was Wilson's idea. Okay, moving on. You can look at the, so you don't have to write anything for this, but just look at the picture. You have, they're using Noah's Ark as a symbolism here. In the League of Nations, it's a rainbow. So this is the world. The world is floating. They've had this flood, but then they see the League of Nations, and it's like the League of Nations is their savior. The League of Nations is their rainbow. The League of Nations is the solution to all the world's problems. Alright, so we're beginning the bottom section of your notes titled The Senate and the Treaty of Versailles. So the Senate here is going to be the U.S. Senate, and basically they made up the treaty, and then what happens is the Treaty of Versailles is sent to America, the papers, all the stipulations and everything in it, and then the Senate goes through it and votes yes or no on whether or not to join are to also sign the Treaty of Versailles. So, hold on. Okay, I'm back. That was Coach League. You can yell at her. So, the Senate got the treaty, and they looked at it, and they didn't like it. They criticized it for a few reasons. There's going to be 3 reasons. On your sheet, you have little dashes next to criticisms of the Versailles Treaty. You need to write each one. The first one, some members of the Senate said that the Versailles Treaty was too soft on the defeated powers. So they thought that the defeated powers would be Germany and Bulgaria and the Ottoman Empire. And they said it wasn't hard enough on them. So they wanted even more than Germany to pay all the reparations and Germany to disarm. They wanted more to happen. But then you had many senators. So some thought it was too easy, but then you had many senators who actually thought the Versailles Treaty was too harsh. And these are especially the German Americans that are in the Senate. They had German ancestry, and they didn't think that their ancestral home country should have to pay as much as they were being forced to pay and be treated like they were by the Versailles Treaty. The last criticism of the Versailles Treaty was that a lot of the Senate members, the senators, opposed the League of Nations, that world court we talked about, because they wanted the U.S. to stay out of world affairs. If you remember, before the war, America had a policy of neutrality. They had a policy of isolationism. They wanted to be isolated, but then they joined the war, and isolated they were no longer. So now they want to be isolated again. They want to stay out of world affairs. This is kind of like, if you stay out of people's business, then you don't get... The idea is that if you stay out of people's business, if you don't get caught up in it, if you don't know the details, if you don't care about other people's stuff, then you won't be getting into trouble. So that's just... Put that on a world scale, and that's what the Senate thought about the League of Nations. They thought it was just getting into too much business. They didn't want to be part of it. Okay, moving on. There was a Senator, Henry Cabot Lodge, specifically, objected to many parts of the treaty, and then you have 3 reasons that he objects. The first reason, and you can shorten this down. You need to write the 3 things, though. Lodge believed that the League of Nations should not have to protect any nation whose territory was threatened. So, basically, the League of Nations shouldn't be the police. They shouldn't have to protect everyone. Some countries should be able to protect themselves. They shouldn't have to have someone taking care of them. He believed that the U.S. should remain independent of the League of Nations. So Lodge said, let's stay out of the mess. Let's be independent. Let's be isolationists. Let's not get involved in this League of Nations. And Lodge also felt that Congress should have the power to decide whether or not to follow the League of Nations. So Congress is made up of the Senate and the House of Representatives, and he thought that the president should not be the only one to have this choice. Because Woodrow Wilson, he wanted to be in the League of Nations. It was his idea. But Henry Cabot Lodge said, that's kind of like a dictator, you saying what we have to do. We should also get a say-so in this. Okay, if you need to pause it, I'm moving on. Alright, in the end, this is what we have. You have 2 bullet points you need to write. First, President Wilson refuses to compromise on the treaty. He liked the treaty. He liked it a lot. They took some of his ideas, but in November of 1919, the Senate rejects the Versailles Treaty. So Wilson wanted the treaty and the League of Nations. He liked it. The Senate did not want the Versailles Treaty. So we did not sign the Versailles Treaty. We rejected it. We did not agree to it. We did not join the League of Nations after all. And this shows the balance of powers. between the judicial branch, the executive branch, and the legislative branch. This shows how the checks and balances, and they're still in place. For example, if Obama had his way, there are many things he refuses to compromise on. One of them was Obamacare. Another one is gun laws. But the Senate keeps vetoing, for example, his ideas on gun laws and immigration. So they keep checking him. They keep saying he can't. They don't want to do what he wants to do. Okay, so if you flip your paper over, you have a sheet. It says Wilson's 14 points and the Treaty of Versailles, and you have two boxes, and on the bottom you have a Venn diagram. And what you're going to do, if you read the directions, it says review President Wilson's 14 points plan for world peace and then the major agreements of the Treaty of Versailles. Find as many of their common goals and place them in the middle of the Venn diagram below. On either side, put into your own words, the different aspects of each. And I've filled in some of those on the bottom for you. But on the left side, you're going to put things that are specific just to Wilson's 14 points, and they're listed up there. Mark them off as you write them. If you want to bunch some of them together, you can. On the right side, you're going to put things that are specific to just the Treaty of Versailles, things that they don't have in common with the 14 points. And then in the middle, where it says both, you put things that both of the 14 points and the Treaty of Versailles want. For example, I put an example in the middle. They both want freedom of the seas and no blockades. That means the same thing. No blockades means you can trade freely on the seas. So, freedom of the seas, no blockades. That is in common for both of them. And you need to fill out the rest of those bullet points. Mark them off as you go through them. And if you need help, ask me for help. Okay. Alright, thank you for your attention. Turn this into the orange box before class is over or whenever you get a chance if you're doing this at home. Thank you, thank you. Bye-bye. Oh, here's your final picture of Woodrow Wilson.